A small bell above a glass door tinkles. Morning light spills across mismatched tables, the hum of conversation, clink of cups. A ramen chalkboard reads specials in cheerful handwriting. The smell of coffee and baked bread fills the air. Maya slips inside, hands full of papers and a tote bag. She checks her phone, breathes, tucks a stray hair behind her ear. She looks like someone who keeps 1,000 details in her head and one or two that always slip. At a corner table, Zara waves frantically. Zara is loud and warm. Wearing a cardigan with a coffee stain she somehow makes charming. She rises, mouthing sorry, and gestures toward the man already there. The man looks out of place and perfect at once. A simple denim jacket over a thrift store shirt, a satchel with well-worn edges, sneakers with evidence of a long walk. He looks up as Maya approaches, and the practiced calm of someone used to scrutiny shifts into the slight, honest surprise of someone meeting someone new. He stands, then notices the papers peeking out of Maya's bag. He smiles, small and unsure. Maya, hi. I'm Maya. Daniel. Nice to meet you. Sorry I'm late. Traffic? No. My watch stopped this morning, and I took it as a sign to be on time, but then I forgot time exists without it, so I ran. Maya laughs. It breaks the ice. Zara, I'll go. Don't be idiots. Text me when you escape with dessert. Or don't. I'll assume you died romantically and plan the funeral accordingly. Zara blows a kiss and leaves. Maya and Daniel sit. They both hover for a beat, both measuring, both relaxed by the awkwardness. They order coffee. The conversation starts small and climbs like a ladder. Maya, so what's your job? Daniel, I sweep floors for the imagination. Mostly freelance odd jobs. Today, I was a substitute library shelver, which I loved. Yesterday, I taught a kid how to whistle with a blade of grass. I fix bikes sometimes. You? Maya, project coordinator at the Community Arts Center. Paperwork dictator. Fundraiser by day, person who steals paintbrushes by night. Daniel, stealing brushes for noble causes. I approve. They trade stories. Daniel tells a story about helping an elderly man on a bus carry a bag of groceries, about learning to fix a punctured tire in the rain. He speaks with an earnestness that turns ordinary acts into something luminous. Maya tells him about the Arts Center's struggle to keep classes for kids from low-income families. She mentions a grant delayed and the fear that lessons might be cut. Daniel listens, his face softening. He asks questions that show he cares about the people behind the problem, not just the headline. He doesn't ask about funding strategies or the politics. He asks about the kids, the names, the one who draws rockets with crayon and the shy girl who paints only in blues. Their coffees turn to lunch. Conversation moves to music and books and the small humiliations of adulthood. Daniel has a knack for remembering odd details and then using them like gifts. A song lyric tucked into the margin of a paper, a recommendation for a book that seems written for some hidden corner of Maya's life. She is puzzled by how naturally generous he is, how little he asks in return. They part that afternoon with a promise to see each other again. Daniel walks away, slower than necessary. Maya watches him, feeling an unnameable click in her chest. Days pass. They meet for dinners that are cheap and full of flavor, for evenings at the park where they eat roasted chestnuts and argue kindly about whether summer movies are secretly better than critics say. Daniel shows up with simple, sincere gestures. A mixtape burned onto a CD with the track list handwritten, a paper crane with an eye drawn on it for luck, a thermos of soup on a night she forgets to eat. He does not have the lingo of the affluent. He can't recommend an exclusive restaurant because he has no membership to anything. He knows all the back alleys of the city and where to find the best street food. He gives her small things his hands made, a leather bookmark he stitched clumsily, a cardboard sign he painted for a neighborhood puppet show. Maya is swept up not by novelty, but by the texture of him. He is present. He is hardworking in ways that matter. When she is overwhelmed with a grant proposal, he sits at the same table, not offering solutions but making her tea and laughing when she forgets commas. A sequence of everyday dates. Rain-soaked umbrellas collapsing into a bicycle basket, a late-night conversation on a rooftop watching the city light itself, a silly duel with chopsticks at a dodgy hole in the wall. They fall into a rhythm. Maya falls, slowly and with caution, into an unexpected tenderness. One night, over cheap takeout, Daniel confesses something that sounds like it should be a punchline, but lands like a confession. Daniel, I haven't had a stable job in a while. I flatter myself with the idea that I'm rich in experience, but my bank account disagrees. I used to have a plan. Somewhere between the plan and reality, life started handing me work that felt less like career and more like living. I don't exactly have a place with my name on the mailbox. I move between couches and a friend's studio. I teach, I fix, I barter. Maya pauses. The admission is not exactly surprising, but she feels it like a stone dropped into quiet water. Maya, you're honest. I like that. Daniel, honesty is cheap if it costs me the truth of who I am. I want whoever stays in my life to stay for the person who holds the cup when it's cold, not for whatever I pretend to be. They look at each other, and for a moment the world narrows to their table and the warm glow of a neon sign outside. Time goes on. Their intimacy grows. Daniel starts opening his bag more. Sometimes out comes a sketchbook, sometimes a flyer for a community play, sometimes a note from a child he tutors. He tells Maya about his mother, about a small town, and an even smaller apartment he remembers with fondness. He is not wallowing in poverty, but focusing on the humanity around him. This is interrupted by something that seems like fate. A morning when Maya, scrolling through the news between meetings, freezes. An image scrolls past her thumb, a headline about a massive merger, a photo of a man at a podium in a well-tailored suit, the CEO of a company called Helix. The picture is Daniel, older, clean-cut, jawline sculpted by suit lighting and PR. Maya's stomach drops. She reads, Helix Industries, tech giant, latest acquisition, founder and CEO Daniel Hart, philanthropist, billionaire, public figure, announced a new initiative to support community arts. Maya's mind rewinds through the weeks. The thrift jacket is the same hands, the satchel the same worn edges. The laugh is the same. But the Daniel she knows does not own skyscrapers. The revelation strains the story she has been living. Her first reaction is disbelief, then betrayal. The Daniel she loved had presented himself as someone with none of those trappings, and now her perception ricochets. How could he hide this? Why would he? Maya does not confront immediately. She watches from a distance, becomes a quiet observer. She sees a Twitter thread quoting a conference speech. She reads an op-ed praising Helix. She sees Daniel photographed with politicians, his face marked with the crispness of PR. Eventually, she confronts him without spectacle, on a bench under a plane tree where the light falls like confetti. Maya, why didn't you tell me? Daniel looks smaller than the photos. He removes his cap and runs fingers through hair that in photos was immaculately styled. Daniel, I didn't tell you because I was afraid of what you'd see. I'm used to being the man in a suit, the voice in a room that gets listened to. When I started this, step back, I didn't want to be an exhibit. I wanted to be a person again. I wanted to feel the ground. Maya, but you lied. That's not the same as not telling me. You actively misled me. Daniel, I didn't set out to mislead anyone. I left my life of title and boardrooms because I was tired of being defined by it. I changed my appearance. I gave my number that belongs to a different life. I didn't say, Hi, I'm Daniel Hart, CEO of Helix. I thought, naively, that my real self might be invisible to everyone unless I stripped away the armor. But I can see how it looks like deception. Maya, why did you think you had to strip away to be seen? Daniel, because there was a part of me I couldn't talk about in that chair. Investors don't talk about the poems they liked at 12. They don't mention the small theater they grew up in. The man behind the podium felt like a costume I was wearing every day. I wanted the person inside the costume to decide who I was, and maybe I was afraid the podium would always win. Maya sits, trying to reconcile the man who stitched bookmarks for her and the man whose face is on a business magazine. She pockets the hurt and the betrayal like two pebbles. Maya, do you know how that feels? To think you know someone and then realize you were in a show and didn't get the program? I trusted you to say who you were. Daniel, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't see the harm in starting over. I thought, stupidly, that if I showed you who I could be without the title, it would be realer. Instead, I made you into a lie's witness. Maya, you made me into someone who fell for the version of you you chose to show. That's not nothing. Daniel, I know. And I don't want to ask for forgiveness like it's a downloadable app. I want to earn it. If you want me to go back into that life and be open about it, I will. If that means you need time to process, take the time. If it means I need to make restitution for the trust one broke, tell me what to do. Maya walks away, not dramatic, not theatrical. She is cold with disappointment. She needs the sanctuary of her apartment and the company of her art students' faces in her mind just to breathe. For a week, they exist in parallel universes. Maya returns to routine, but everything feels colored. Daniel emails, leaves voicemails, some clumsy, some poetic, but she does not answer. She goes to work and counts crayons and checks boxes and tries to be present. At the arts center, parents ask about new funding. Maya shields an anxious smile. At night, alone, she replays their conversations. She feels foolish for letting someone else's title cut so deep, but she also feels violated. Daniel does not try to sweep the problem away with money or spectacle. He starts with small, specific actions. He contacts the arts center the way a thoughtful philanthropist might, but without fanfare. He offers unrestricted support, funds for supplies, a fund for scholarships, a grant that would remove the immediate threat to the classes Maya runs. Maya hears about an anonymous donor who has given enough to cover the next year of programming. The check comes with no press release, but a note for the kids who draw rockets. Signed simply D. She is infuriated and grateful simultaneously. Did he think money could buy back honesty? She is furious that he assumed his check would speak louder than his words, and grateful for the result. Children with brushes. Daniel shows up one evening at the center with a crate of materials and a simple intention: to be useful without ceremony. He sits in the back during a class, hands rough from some workday, and watches the kids. He helps hang a mural. He sweeps the floor. Maya watches him, the trust between them frayed but not yet severed. The kids flock to him because he genuinely engages. He kneels to tie laces, to show how to make a paper puppet, to accept a messy handshake. After the class, she pulls him aside. Maya, you could have saved the center without doing any of this. You could have sent a lawyer, or a statement, or a foundation. Why come in person to sweep the floor? Daniel, because sweeping is part of listening. Because when I give money from across a table, I buy distance as well as help. I wanted to close that distance. Also, because sweeping is embarrassment therapy for me. I like to feel humble in a way that can't be scheduled. Maya, so this was about you proving something. Daniel, isn't everything I do about trying to be less afraid? I wanted to show up the way I needed someone to show up for me when I was small. But I also wanted to show you that there are things I will do that are not for headlines. Maya, you still kept the biggest headline hidden. Daniel, I did. And I accept that hiding it was wrong. But I loved you for the person you are, Maya. Not for the part of me that pays bills. Maya looks at him, and for the first time since the reveal, she sees something like humility in his eyes. No press lighting, no polished gloss, just the man. They talk. It is painful, honest conversation that takes them through why he hid, why she felt betrayed, what each expects from intimacy. Daniel makes no grand promises. He promises transparency. He shows her emails that speak candidly about his reasons, not as defense, but as documentation of his internal struggle. He allows her to ask any question, and he answers without evasion. She asks about influence, about whether his position could ever override her community work in ways she wouldn't foresee. He explains his commitment to decentralization in his company, to giving power to local initiatives, to avoiding paternalism. He shares his vision for corporate responsibility, but he does not demand belief. Slowly, cautiously, their tentative steps become choices. He steps back into the world that recognized him, but he chooses to navigate it differently. He brings his platform to amplify others rather than to draw attention to himself. He meets Maya's friends not as a celebrity, but as a man who listens. He sits in planning meetings with parents and students, but he sits at the back more often than the front. There are missteps. A journalist catches sight of Daniel at a neighborhood bake sale and writes a feature. The story sensationalizes the undercover billionaire. Maya reads headlines that spin the narrative into a morality play. People take sides. Some praise him for his humility, others scold him for deception. Maya receives messages from strangers and from friends, telling her what she should do. She feels like an object in other people's narrative arcs. She confronts Daniel again, furious. Maya, you're famous in a way I never asked for. People think it's your story, and I feel like the subplot. Daniel, I'm sorry. I wanted to be private. I wanted slow and ordinary. I can step back into the shadows if you want. But I can't undo the fact that the world is watching now. I can, however, keep choosing to do things quietly. I can refuse interviews. I can insist the fun stay anonymous. I can be boring in public. Most of all, I can keep being honest with you. Maya breathes, eyes wet. She is tired of watching her life be rearranged by other people's assumptions. But she also recognizes that Daniel is actively choosing restraint, that he's not letting his power eclipse the people he wants to help. Time softens the jagged edges. Daniel continues to demonstrate, day by day, the kind of person he said he wanted to be. He insists that when Helix funds a program, local leaders set priorities. He openly credits the neighborhood's work rather than attaching his name. Their relationship becomes a daily negotiation of loyalty and vulnerability. When Maya's ex, Raj, returns temporarily to town and tries to rekindle something, Daniel does not react with possessiveness. He trusts Maya. He knows she can choose. She does choose him because she has chosen to see his ongoing actions, not only his origin story. There is a quiet turning point months later during the community's summer festival. The park is alive with hand-painted banners and children running with paper wings. Maya organizes an art auction. Daniel volunteers at a booth making shadow puppets. The line snakes around the block. The mayor stops by to give a speech that thanks volunteers and donors. Daniel is in the audience, in an ordinary shirt, clapping. When the auction ends and the applause settles, Maya takes the microphone without ceremony. Maya, this community has been held together by hours and hearts. People who stepped in without asking for anything in return. People who made art not to sell, but to be seen. Today we raised enough to keep classes for the next year. I'm grateful to everyone who gave, to the kids who painted, to my team who never slept, and to anyone here who believes that art matters. Her eyes scan the crowd until they meet his. She sees pride there, not as ownership, but as awe for the work the community has done. Later, they walk home side by side through an alley lit by string lights. It has become their rhythm to share silence as comfortably as words. Daniel, I used to think that showing someone my resources meant something. Now I think showing up is the resource. Maya show up and sweep floors. Daniel smiles. Daniel and fix bicycles. And teach kids how to whistle. And, apparently, make a terrible shadow puppet that looks like a raccoon. They stop beneath a street lamp. He takes her hands gently. Daniel, I don't know what tomorrow brings. My company will keep marching along, probably making headlines I won't like. But I promise to keep bringing my messy, ordinary self to you. I promise transparency and the right to be angry when I break my promises and the right to leave if you decide that matters more than it doesn't. Maya leans in, forehead to forehead. There is no need for grander speeches. Maya, I promise to call you out when you hide and to forgive when you show that you mean it. I promise to let you be both the man who stands at podiums and the man who stitches bookmarks, because people are complicated and love should be big enough for that. They kiss, a simple, human connection. Around them, the city breathes. It is imperfect and loud and honest in the way only cities can be. Months later, at Helix's charity initiative launch, Daniel declines to be the headline. He brings actual community members onto a stage and lets them speak. He turns down a television interview that would make him the center. Instead, he introduces Maya as the person who taught him how to make sure help is useful before it's visible. Maya, nervous, humorous, grateful, speaks about why art matters. She is introduced not as a trophy, but as a leader. The cameras capture her, and in the crowd there is a quiet satisfaction that the narrative has shifted. It is not about one man's fall from a pedestal or his theatrical retreat. It is about people seeing each other. There are still days of friction. There are still nights when Maya thinks she should have known and nights when Daniel lies awake thinking about consequences. But the axis of their relationship has moved from secrecy to partnership. One evening, they visit the small apartment Daniel remembered in the town where he grew up. He has taken Maya back to show her the place where his father taught him to patch a roof and where his mother kept a garden in a tin can. It is humble. It is tender. He brings her to a mailbox with peeling paint and a nameplate he kept inside his heart. Daniel, this was my first home. I used to imagine buying it back and making it an art school. It felt impossible then, but not anymore. Maya, we could teach there. We could run a summer program. It would be messy and perfect. Daniel nods, hands inches away from hers. He looks like someone who has learned to value small promises. Daniel, I don't need to be famous to be generous. I don't need to be anonymous to be real. I need to be honest. With you. With the people I help. With myself. Maya steps closer. He does not reach for her as a prize or a victory. He reaches as a person who asks for partnership. They paint the mailbox together. Paint drips down their fingers. They laugh. The scene is not cinematic in the way tabloids imagine. It is ordinary and human and loud with the sound of life being made. The script of their lives continues without the clean cuts of film. There are meetings and mistakes, public misinterpretations, and private reconciliations. He makes tough decisions at the company to be more accountable. She navigates the bureaucracies of funding to keep programs alive. They do not always agree, but they practice listening. At a quiet dinner, months after the reveal, Daniel takes out a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. He hands it to Maya. On it, a poem, 12 lines, about a man who learned the value of being seen. No signature, because he has made the choice that his actions will be his signature. Maya reads it, eyes filling. She looks up and sees not the suit, not the headline, not the billionaire myth, but the man who taught a child to whistle and who sweeps floors when the mess matters. She presses the paper to her chest. Maya, you could have told me anything, and I would have told you my fears. But I'm glad we got here, messy as it was. Daniel, me too. I was trying to be both brave and small, and I forgot there is bravery in being honest from the start. They sit with their imperfect truths, letting time do the slow, steady work of trust. The city lights blink. Somewhere, someone is starting a new play. Someone else is figuring out how to make a budget stretch. Kids are learning to mix colors that shouldn't go together and finding out they do. In the middle of all of it, two people who came from different places find ways to build a life that includes both thrift store jackets and boardroom chairs, both thrifted bookmarks and philanthropic policy. Their love is not wrapped in gloss. It is built from daily acts, showing up when storms hit, opening doors that lead to uncomfortable conversations, offering money without performing generosity, giving power to those it should belong to, and sitting with the truth when it hurts. When the story of the undercover billionaire finally becomes a feature piece, it's not a scandal. It's an awkward, human tale about the messy middle between identity and intention, about the way power can be used or hidden, about the humility sometimes required to unlearn performance.